Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. And thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Ali Rahman, VP of Growth at Stocksy, and your host today. Quick introduction about Stocksy. We're an artist-led creative media cooperative, a resource where you can get your stock and custom visual needs. With over 2,000 artists dotted across 90 countries, we're on a mission to prioritize fair pay, originality, and creativity. We've got a packed agenda today, and the conversation around the curation paradox is very relevant and timely, especially in today's world, which is full of mass appeal and visual sameness. With this amount of content at our fingertips, standing out for brands and creatives is hard. This webinar will address these challenges and provide an approach to break through. On that note, let me introduce the speakers. We're really excited to have Amy Carvajal from Amy & Co. Amy is a creative executive and an advisor. She has been championing innovation, collaboration, and inclusion in the creative media industry for over 20 years. Her unique perspective and passion for advertising helped her earn over 90 industry awards, a truly remarkable achievement, including being named one of campaign's most inspiring women in 2024. She worked with brands like Kimberly-Clark, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, to name a few. Her work has featured in major publications like Ad Age and the New York Times. Thank you, Amy, for joining. From Stocksy, you'll hear from Jen Ross, our creative director. She has a background and a lot of experience in fine arts and curation with a deep understanding of art and culture. And from our CEO, Trace Cohen. She's a recognized leader in brand and the digital media space. Also, during this webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A section. We'll try to respond to them at the end of the webinar. On that note, I'll pass it over to Trace to get us started. Over to you, Trace.
Thank you so much. Thanks for kicking us off, Ali. And thanks for diving into the topic Ali was talking about, which is we're living in a time where there's this very real conversation about the enshittification of the interweb, so to speak, and everything becoming just meh or bland or blah as we kind of normalize to sameness. We live in this age of big content, this never-ending fire hose of algorithmically juiced recommendations, doom scrolling, and oh my God, I just threw away an hour of my life. Happened to me this morning, and I promised it would never happen to me again, where inspiration has never been more abundant and accessible, yet everyone seems to be pulling from the same pool, remixing the same ideas, feeding the same Ouroboros of content about content. So it's this weird time where instead of things becoming more interesting and diverse, which they really could be, things are collapsing into sameness and, dare I say, fear and distortion too. So, from a brand perspective, rather than pushing creative boundaries, brands, creatives, platforms all seem to be optimizing for the same, that which is safe. It's leading to this global design monoculture that feels increasingly frictionless and yet, dare we say, boring. So while we are here to talk about curation and all the great ways that intentional curation from trusted sources can get us from the meh to there, that there being that inspired space again, the big question underlying this whole theme is kind of a question: is creativity in crisis? So we kind of know this blanding to be true, right? Why do cafes and Airbnbs look the same in Tokyo and New Mexico and South Africa? There's a great Ezra Klein and Kyle Chayka podcast on this topic. It's almost like there's this international conspiracy for everything to look like, I don't know, a WeWork or a modern farmhouse, and we're still in it, right? In 2024, there were literally 0 original films that cracked the top 15 of highest grossing movies. It was only franchise and sequel movies that made it to the top list. And, might not be factual, but feels actual, that every Super Bowl ad kind of just felt like it was written by an AI trained on the last 10 years of Super Bowl ads. So, there are these kind of key heat centers that mapping this cultural conversation. They tend to get rolled into the same argument, but they're closely connected, a little bit distinct phenomena. The one is that algorithms prioritize content that performs well with broadest audiences, so we regress to the mean. And the second is that we're optimized for aesthetic blandness, right? So because the algo optimizes to past performance, who we were yesterday, they reinforce the familiar rather than create new. Essentially, this idea of taste compression. So, high level, we have this tyranny of abundance, we have more information than ever before, we have this horrible pressure to consume more, to know more, all head, no heart, shudder goes here. And the gist of it all is that we need better curation to get us to inspiration, be that tools, people, trusted sources to be discussed. But I guess with that, welcome to the curation paradox. This is the context and the content. And with that, also, I'm going to turn to Amy, and it's so brilliant to have you here, Amy. You have such deep expertise in this space, and this whole move to blandness, this whole idea of creativity in crisis. Does this resonate as true? Or are you feeling this as well? Does it resonate as true? Is anything stand out right now? And I'm kind of asking you from a place because as both creative director, creative executive, creative leader, and also adjudicator, where you're seeing so much work out there in leading as a juror, the Lears, etc. Would tell us what's up.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to say that I'm inspired by all creativity and the things that are out there. I'm a very curious person, so I like to try and discover, but it'll sound, I think everyone's looking for, what is the most exciting thing or what am I seeing? And honestly, not a whole lot stands out right now. And why is that? I think that everything in the landscape is just changing so rapidly, and everyone and everything is trying to do so much that it ends up doing not much. And do I think that things are in crisis because of this? I feel like we're in a moment in time where we need to do something very different, but I'm also really excited about what this means for true creative minds.
Yeah.
And breaking away from this sea of sameness, and what is happening right now is sometimes a moment in time what we think is really differentiated is really fast outdated because of this rapid changing landscape, and people trying to catch up, or people grabbing the latest shiny object or using AI. And when you mention this kind of curation that's all the same, I think about CES tech event a couple years ago when AI was being used to generate creative and make content. And I walked the floor and it was just booth after booth of all of these backdrops of all these vendors at this tech event using AI to create the graphics for their booths. And because they used AI as the means for the solution, but not a tool in their toolbox of creativity, the floor became all the same. You walked from booth after booth, and you saw these weird, surreal, warped images that you knew was AI, strawberries with biohazard green-looking tops, and body images that weren't anatomically correct. And you just felt nothing really stood out. It was everybody thought that using AI to create their content and their space was something very unique and cutting edge. And what ended up happening was everyone had that idea, and using AI to their solution meant that nothing really stood out as unique. I mean, of course, there was some spectacular, but generally it was the sea of same. And I think that to break away from that, that's where I get really excited. It truly takes creative minds and diversity of thought. And, the best ideas come from diverse thinking and considering and pushing and challenging the norm to get alternate viewpoints. Always look for different angles on something. And because you have to start somewhere and draw from inspiration as creatives and creative minds, sources like other artists or even wonderful stock. When you have a great starting point, or you're using AI to help you get some thoughts out of your head, or whatever the tools in your toolbox are, when you have something that's a starting point that's not common and not pulling from the norm, you have that leg up. And then using your creativity and these tools to enhance our creative human skills that only we have, emotion, storytelling, critical thinking, that true art becomes it's our own perspective. And that's something that AI technology, sea of same, can't solution to. We really have to be the experts of guiding and not allowing it to dictate our work and really challenge convention. And that's where I get excited that we really should and will break away from this, crisis that we're in of everyone is now a creative and using these tools to come to solutions that are becoming a common solution that we're all seeing. But we can and will evolve out of that using all of our other tools that we have at our fingertips and the human nature that breaks us away from what everyone is pulling from that common source.
Yeah, we didn't actually write Amy a script, but she just perfectly explained the argument or the phenomena that we're going to walk you through, which is the curation paradox. And I'm going to jump into presentation mode. So Trace introduced what this is, but to get diagrammatical about it, this is a phenomena where increased production, abundant resources, and greater access paradoxically leads to a narrowing of what people meaningfully engage with. And all of this depends on energy. And it is at a certain point when we talk about peak complexity, the cost of this complexity starts to outweigh its benefits. And whether we're talking about our social feeds or collapsing empires, this happens when complexity reaches a point of diminishing returns, where more choice and variation no longer continues to enhance value, but instead contributes to inefficiencies and stagnation. The good news is that cultural ecosystems adapt. History has shown that when mainstream creativity becomes too reductive or rigid, or when creativity is suppressed, then natural counterforces emerge to correct for it. So a couple of examples would be the avant-garde movement of the 20th century was kind of a reaction to the traditionalism and the rationalism of the 19th. Independent cinema was largely born in response to the Hays Code, which enforced moral censorship and made all of the major studio films boring. And then one other example, which I find really fascinating, is this study, which it's called The Evolution of Pop Music in the USA from 1960 to 2010. And it analyzed the sound properties of every song that had appeared in the charts over that period, and found that evolution wasn't incremental, but had three really distinct stylistic revolutions around 1964, 1983, and 1991. Where there are moments of diversification and expansion, but then they are followed by contractions and homogeneity. So anyway, our unsung hero at Stocksy, our designer Bree, created this awesome flowchart for us to explain how both of these energy systems can be true, one leading to contraction and dimming, and one leading to diversification and evolution. So here's a quote by Clay Shirky, who is the Vice Provost of Educational Technologies at NYU. And this is basically to say that the valve in the system that we're just talking about previously is filtration. And it's sort of like a membrane that becomes necessary and an interface between overwhelming abundance and its sublimation into something useful. And it doesn't sound sexy, but this has always been the main job of curation, which is to pass bodies of things into something coherent and navigable. An example we just want to use is that the British Museum has 8 million objects in its permanent collection, but at any given time, there's only about 80,000 on display. So that's literally 1%. And then something similar is, happening with the internet, where earlier this year, the index web contained 0.02 billion pages, but on average, people visit 6 to 10 web pages a day. So, we only see the tiniest corners of the ever-expanding universe. And this isn't new. General access to collected bodies of knowledge has always been shaped to some degree, by the systems we use to decide relevance, whether there's academic canons or genre categorizations or chronological hierarchies. And, none of it has ever been neutral. Knowledge is shaped by social structures and power dynamics and encoded institutional biases, all of which determines what gets amplified and what fades into obscurity. So the takeaway is, the more critically we individually engage with how cultural knowledge is architectured, then we can less rely on imperfect systems to do it for us. So this leads us to the semantic gap, and that's a term that describes the fundamental problem of translating human aesthetic experience into machine readable data. The surface of the internet is obviously like this amazing superconductor for the transmission of individual knowledge, but the data that flows underneath that surface is the more powerful and influential collective knowledge. And this is just important to remember and remind ourselves why we can't entirely outsource curation to technology, because machine learning is really good at turning cultural problems into technical problems, but those are addressed by engineers who might not be great at turning cultural problems, looking at the cultural problems inherent in technology. So anyway, AI can assist with surfacing content quickly and at scale. It's great for recognizing patterns. It can tell you people who like brutalist architecture, like to save images of concrete staircases, but it won't tell you why, because they rely on structured data like likes and shares, and that sort of metric of engagement. But what makes two things related can be similar in infinite ways, because similarity is kind of shaped by this background connective tissue of perspective and context, which just allows for endless comparisons between qualities that are invisible to traditional metrics, but deeply intuitive to human perception. So here I am. I'm shamelessly quoting myself. AI will never close the gap between the infinite qualities and gradations of feeling tones that you have to have a body to feel. So, you know, even though we tend to think of algorithms having the eye of Sauron, they don't know what mood we're in, what t-shirt we're wearing. They don't know what we just asked WebMD. They don't have that background context. And I really like this quote. It's from this book called You Have Not Yet Heard Your Favorite Song. And it's by a former data scientist at Spotify who explains that, you know, Spotify knows that you like a song because you played it 10 times, but it doesn't know if you're doing that for the drums or despite the banjo. So this kind of brings us to the obvious conclusion that humans are still relevant, and to find your trusted guides. So machine learning can mimic structure, but misses the alchemy of human experience that functions on our memories and our instincts and our senses. And successful brands and creatives will bridge this divide by developing communication and creative frameworks that leverage emotion, imagination, and context in ways that machines aren't yet able to. It's like humor. It's like, why is something funny? It's usually a blend of something quite precise and unpredictable that resists formula. And then other qualities that humans readily bring to the table are sensory depth, serendipitous discovery, emotional intelligence, and imaginative transcendence.
Jen, I just want to say I really enjoyed the shameless quote, and I love that reminder about, you know, I hate that we're in a position, or that we're even going in some ways to this conversation where we're comparing ourselves to how we have to justify ourselves versus the machine. And I think it's very beautiful to be reminded that we have a body and to kind of embody ourselves. And like, really, that is the basis, that is the distinction of what we're talking about. So I think it's super powerful.
Yeah. So to confirm this in quantitative ways, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, which just came out at the end of last year, flagged creative thinking, analytical thinking, and curiosity as top-tier professional skills for 2030. You know, and what's interesting and what's being really hotly debated right now is the concept of mass amortization, and how with the democratization of creative tools, that's kind of opened the floodgates, or I guess like more of a fire hose of content, and those in the quote unquote like discipline or the professional field of creative work are going to have to lead into critical thinking and analytical skills more and more to stay ahead.
Amy, a question for you. So I think this is such a resonant quote, right? The moves you don't make are as important as the moves that you do make. And we'd love to learn from you around like the moves to make and the moves not to make. And I'm not even going to say it in an AI world versus a now world, but really like for us to be able to learn a bit more about your process, your practices for creating content amidst this world of more content, more choice, more complexity.
Yeah. Curiosity and discovery, I think, is, the most powerful tool that we have. And I think what's happening is everybody being so curious and having all these tools that we now have at our fingertips, it becomes exciting, and everyone is a creative, it's sort of what's happening now allows everyone to bring out their creativity, which means the challenge of trying to break away from the norm and really think different is something that is really, really important to how we work with our brands and get creative, that is going to stand out and really resonate. And I think that comes from emotion and that critical thinking. I think about what is creativity, and creativity is really the ability to see the world differently. And that is a true, it's an essence that only us humans have. AI pulls from what was, not what will be. So, I know that you're not asking an AI specific question, but I think that the tech, that we're overwhelmed with all of these wonderful tools. They're really exciting. I love them. It unlocks all this creativity, but now you have all of this creativity happening. So the norm almost got raised, and you have a ton of things happening that are the same. So now we have to challenge ourselves even further to figure out how do we leapfrog away from that and do something truly unique. And that diversity of thought and challenging what exists and has already happened, that technology is pulling from, aren't the answers and the solutions. They're part of our toolbox, but we really have to decide what comes next and define that. And I think that comes from passion and emotion, and that's really only true to us. And the people that are the most inspired and know how to, come up with unique prompts and grow away from common and help to diversify and think about doing something different, challenging each other. The end solution I really think is diversity of thinking and helping each other unlock things that maybe you haven't thought of, and all those different facets that may not be uncovered. And when you push and challenge and different perspectives, including using technology as part of that, it almost is like, right now, the way that I'm using AI is almost to tell me, what is the norm? I don't believe that it's telling me the solution. When I'm trying to get something out of my head, I'll think of a great idea, kind of work with AI to craft it. And if it gives me that same solution, I know it's not unique yet, because it shouldn't tell me and feed me back something that is different, because it's pulling from what happened and what exists and what's out there. So it's almost like, oh, shoot, okay, got to challenge further and go to other places and try and find other sources of inspiration, or prompt it way differently, come up with something that really dictates and tries to get technology to think differently to enable me to help craft where I think we need to go. And I think that's really what, when it resonates. And, there's an example. There's a lot of people talking about OpenAI's Super Bowl spot, like it, didn't like it. They also had a wonderful brand video that wasn't their spot. But their rebrand is really being recognized as something that's been crafted and different. And they're leading the charge on artificial intelligence and technology. And they had humans and people make that work. And they used a traditional form of media to promote their brand. So, even the tech leaders, it still comes down to the humans made something and used technology to get us there. So I think that there's this excitement and race right now. And there's so much out there that it's really, how do we navigate that? How do we challenge differently? How do we kind of leapfrog away from that? And, even on some of the jury panels I'm on, we discuss something that was really exciting or used technology or used AI, and that moment in time was different, but it fast got outdated. And, we had to discuss, like, do we want to award this because it did something great at that moment that no one else was doing? And, a lot of the discussions came down to, true differentiated work will be meaningful and stand the test of time and won't feel like a novelty that just was a spike. So I think that that's where our critical thinking and our push and our challenge is to try and do something really different and get excited and resonate is what will become impactful and different. And that's really what I think, if we think about creativity as looking at the world differently, then that is ultimately the greatest creative is going to be different for not just a moment and spike, but live on forever. People still talk about Apple's launch spot, the mad rush, and that it's so epic that we still can watch that and say, wow, that was really, really unique and different even today.
I love that. And sorry for moving slides too quick. I got trigger happy. So yeah, I think it's funny, the sort of the characteristics that we can now diagnose so easily as ChatGPT. Like anytime I see that anything's being described as a rich tapestry, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely ChatGPT. But speaking of rich tapestries, leading on from this discussion of how the new really important skill set that we need to lean into is this deep contextuality, and having this deep contextual fluency is forecasted to leverage the most the creativity that comes from inspiration, from your kind of passion, and from all of those drivers that are the reason why we got into this in the first place. And I think it's really nice to think of creativity as that network effect, and it's about these dynamic communities, not just a body, but also communities and relationships and genres. They don't evolve in a vacuum, and they shift and they mutate based on who's using them and who's remixing them and pushing them forward. So when I was thinking about all of this, it reminded me of this exhibition that I worked on quite a long time ago, 2012, at the Museum of Modern Art, and it's called Inventing Abstraction. And the curator, Leah Dickerman, had this really novel idea of how to represent the development of 20th century abstraction as a movement, not by chronological or linear progression, like one artist passing a baton on to another, but more through mapping letters exchanged by artists, thinkers, writers, and to show the dimensionality of the network effect of intellectual exchange and how movements evolve socially and through asymmetric and asynchronous influence. And to the right, this is Suit World, which is a really cool kind of contemporary example of a spatial directory for visual inspiration, which if you go on it and play around, it's pretty fun, but you can reorganize dynamically by color, chronology, curator, type, similarity, etc. So, to continue down this path of thinking of curation in terms of understanding communities, then we can also understand its job as preserving culture and also giving communities the tools and to shape their own story, but also their own spaces. So I have this example of it's of the Berghain, from the Berghain Club, which is the notoriously, I'm sure we all know what it is, but it's the notoriously hard to get into Berlin nightclub that has famously rejected Elon Musk, for good reasons, we now know, and Britney Spears, and whole books have been written on how to get into this club. And there's still no daylight into what criteria kind of informs their mythically inscrutable door policy. But Sven, who is the head bouncer for the last 20 years, has said that he feels a responsibility for creating a safe space for the people who actually come purely for the music and the community and the experience. So the issue of subjective discrimination aside, I think it's a really interesting case study of human curation in real time, curating crowds and calibrating energy, understanding that sort of alchemy between the artist, the vibe, the crowd for that night, who's here for the music, who would be additive and who would be potentially extractive, like American tourists. And also it's a space that resists the pressure for scale, for the sake of scale. And it isn't chasing infinite linear growth, but it knows what it is and it sticks to it. And that's what makes it special and cool. So there are different ways of understanding the economic value of curation, but basically there are two models. Well, there's probably a lot of models, but the models that we're going to talk about are the industrial model of selection and the curated model of selection. So one, like the industrial model is like what you think of with traditionally with like a producer, a wholesaler, a retailer, and a consumer. And then the curated model of selection is where items are really carefully chosen, but based on a specific audience in mind. So, obviously, while one thrives on scale and uniformity, the other model creates value by prioritizing value and relevance over volume. That kind of brings us to the problem at hand, which is that curation is a value add, but it also adds work. And we're all trying to find the time to organize our tabs, I suppose. And like, we're all losing the war on notifications. I feel like a lot of people I know right now are finally abandoning their original email accounts because they're just totally overrun by spam and, generated by it's like everything you've thought about, or even thought about for the last 20 years while you've been on the internet. So it's just chaos. And in this situation, we tend to focus on the information that's the most relevant to the problem or the topic that we're focused on at that very moment. However, it's really important to remember that future breakthroughs and like these unexpected flashes of insight and creative connections that drive innovation are, they're not from what we already know, but like from the ideas that we've collected, but not fully processed, but planted and waiting for the right connection to be made. So from a neurobiological perspective, insight is, or what the aha moment is this burst of high frequency gamma wave activity, which indicates a sudden restructuring of information neurosemantic memory network. So again, like, creative communities, insight is a network effect. And the semantic memory network is really crucial for creativity because it allows the brain to retrieve, connect, and recombine stored knowledge in really novel ways. And it serves as the foundation for associative thinking, which is obviously like a key cognitive process behind creative insight and problem solving. So this is a very good reason why you should not let ChatGPT do your thinking for you, because collecting is a form of thinking and connection is a form of intelligence. So the takeaway is don't stop collecting, but we do have to start organizing. And serendipity, to go back to that, is also this very underrated condition for creative thinking because creativity thrives in relaxed states. That's why we have ideas like in the shower, when we go for a walk. It relies on unconscious processing. And stress and overanalysis can block insight by keeping the prefrontal cortex too rigidly focused on the problem. So I really like this quote. Serendipity is the faculty of finding things we did not know we were looking for. There are lots of tools out there for knowledge management and kind of bookmarking, but AI can do that for you. The things that AI can't do are make these serendipitous connections, and it cannot be curious, going back to Amy's point. And here at Stocksy, we just wanted to provide a few examples of some platforms that we really like for curation and discovery, because there's no algorithmic recommendation feed, no likes or social metric. So, no disruptions there. And then just clean connection-based discovery features for exploring aesthetics and pulling on conceptual threads. So yeah, we've just got Cosmo, Arena, and Savvy. And I will note that we're not sponsored by any of these. So yes, conventional wisdom suggests that periods of economic uncertainty and social crisis, which we are certainly experiencing at the moment, does sort of lead to risk aversion, and the impulse towards safety does manifest in creative and commercial decisions that favor the simplified and the inoffensive. So McKinsey and Company, they developed a index. It's called the Award Creativity Score to quantify the value of creative innovation in advertising and marketing. And the key findings were that companies who score really high on the ACS outperform their peers in financial metrics, as do creative leaders. And customer delight which I guess would characterize by unexpected and surprising experiences, can lead to a 25% increase in reusage intentions. That's all to say, yes, creativity is great, but every brand, every creative identity is faced with the same challenge, which is like, how do you evolve? How do you push creativity and create the conditions for surprise and delight while staying true to your DNA? How do you scale and maintain your edge? And theoretically, like the more you appeal to everyone, the less you appeal to anyone. And so we thought it might be helpful to kind of translate this as the friction between consistency and evolution and map it on taste and style. So as two counter forces that are actually deeply connected. So taste, that's your anchor. It's like what you're inherently drawn to and what feels right or like emotionally correct, and it's your internal compass. Whereas style at its core is a curatorial act. It's like a dynamic, externalized expression that responds to the world and is informed by your compass, but not driven by it. And Trace actually asked me yesterday what I would kind of want people to take away from this. And I just thought, part of what makes our craft and our art enjoyable in the long term is this process of learning and unlearning and relearning and coming up with random stuff and being inspired and being curious. And it is supposed to be complicated and it does need friction. And I think that our whole tech-driven economic model that has been kind of overlaid in the creative industries has become too fixated on creating like frictionless products, services, and in the long run, societies that suck out all the joy that comes with being human. So kind of sum that up, this is the curation paradox. It's, curation isn't about picking and choosing, but it's about knowing when to let intuition override influence and when to let influence shape intuition. And the most interesting creative work happens in that tension. And it's in the acts of love and care that we pay to our work and to others.
Thanks, Jen. I love that. I love the quote about style being about consistency. It's almost relieving. It's like, great, we just get to be consistent in who we are. And Amy, in the context of create something new, Amy and I both know each other through our friend and prior webinar guest, Shane Ginsberg, and he has this mantra, which is create something new every day. And I love it because I think that is our task and that is our work in the world as creatives. Jen, on your earlier slide, we're talking about creativity is good for business, and it's also good for creating work for good. And so I guess, Amy, my question to you is that you do this every day. You have a commitment in your work with Amy and Company to create impact by design. And I know that the work that you're focused on is very much around supporting brands that can make a positive impact, become more cutting edge. And before I come back and kind of ask you about how you do that, like Amy's work has been various, done incredible body of work in her career. She, just for reference, there was the work that she did with Codex, which was the Break the Cycle campaign, which really was about having a period normal, as Amy put it, like 50% of the population has a period, like let's make it normal. And have very much been in this kind of area of kind of breaking the cycle and creating something new. So I guess as you continue your legacy and in your work supporting brands that can make a positive impact, how do you do it? Like, how do you make brands more cutting edge? What are the, I guess I'm coming back a little bit more to the tools and practices, but what does it take?
So I want to thank you for asking that. And I want to sort of recap on what Genevieve said, which is, first, all those beautiful mutations and unexpected surprises that you referenced, and also being curious and collecting and drawing from sources that may not be, they're different sources, or tapping from something in a very unusual place that you didn't expect to be surprised and delighted. What happened with that case was we very much were in discovery mode and trying to, it was many years ago when the category was white and medicinal. And I think what it takes to do great creative is to be confident and bold and do something really, really different. You have to, everyone will resist it. The natural human instinct is to gravitate towards what is common. They're comfortable in common. So everyone will be uncomfortable when you present them with something that's really different. And I think that's what artists and, we elicit emotions, we get reactions, and sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative, but it all draws something out of us. And so to be really bold and different takes a lot and a lot of energy, and you have to be passionate and believe in what you're doing. And when we did that, we were researching and speaking to our audience. We found that fem care is the most loyal category. So we knew that we had to talk to young teens because we had to get them and speak to them when they were adopting their products. When we went out to speak with the young teens, who knew that this was going to drive everything? We asked them how they felt about their period, and we did a survey, and we found that 98%, that is almost 100% of females, 50% of the population, felt ill-prepared for their period. And we said, we have to do something about that. That is unacceptable. And as a period brand, a fem care brand with these products, we have to take a stance against that. And that is how we're going to stand out and resonate and be the brand for this audience and say, we are here for you, we understand you. And we can't say that this is Mother Nature's gift. It is not a pleasant experience. And we're going to be real about this. And we're going to embrace what is a natural thing that happens to our bodies. And it's not pleasant. And let's take a real stance at that. So we completely went at the category and broke down all the walls of taboo and said there should not be shame that surrounds this. And because of our passion and our belief in what we were doing, it was very bold. We took on the entire category. We had all kinds of risk plans to say what happens when these other competitors and top other brands might take a stance with this, because we're kind of making fun of it. We took a lighthearted approach and kind of made fun of it all and said that this was not acceptable. And it just went viral. It was so successful. The brand had to go dark. They could not keep the supply up with the demand. It was fantastic. And I'm proud of when you walk the aisle today, it's now black in colors and it's no longer looking medicinal. We still have a lot of work to do in this area, but we started something. And I think that that's what it takes, is really drawing from those, Genevieve, you talked about this, is really drawing from those places and sources that are unexpected and collecting your inspiration, because you never know when you need to kind of pull into that hat of tricks, and you'll find these surprising things that might spark this different way of thinking. And there's an example that is out there now and is current that I am very jealous that I did not do. Hats off to them. I think when you think about water, if I were to say, how would you describe water? You'd say pure, clean, blue, hydro. You would not say death. Liquid Death brand, fantastic. I mean, they just said, let's not do what everyone is doing. Let's take a stance and say, that this is their whole mantra about death, murder your thirst and death to plastic.
Brilliant.
We're in a metal can that looks like heavy metal design. I mean, talk about going against the grain. They built an entire brand on this. They rebelled against the norm, and they are enormously successful. And what a great case and a different approach for a brand. And that's an example of, if you were to ask the common hydro, clean, pure water, you're not going to be led to Liquid Death. That was a human, gutsy, ballsy move that worked for them, and kudos to them. So I think that we need tapping those areas and looking at sources that may not be the most expected, you never know what you're going to find. And it takes us artists and challengers and strategy to really push each other and do that. And I think that's, when we come together and try and challenge the norm, we come up with something really special, especially when we follow our passion. The passion and the inner, that guides us to do something really different is that drive.
Thank you so much. Yeah, super, super powerful. And I'm just going to note that I really heard you say, define yourself as curious, talk to curiosity as the sort of cornerstone of creativity. Thanks, Amy, for inspiring us around this idea of creativity and curiosity. It sounds like obviously the two go together, but it's really got me kind of, inspired to really explore this domain and this super profound idea that you shared with us, which is that honestly, use AI for table stakes, use it to identify what is the norm, and then kind of create something new on top of that with these awesome examples. So thank you so much. Ali, where are we at?
Hi, great. So a big thank you to all our speakers. Really great engagement from our attendees. So thank you all. For me, a really insightful session, lots of great information, thoughts, and real life examples. And as a practitioner myself, lots to take away. But the one that stood out for me is be bold and be different. So before we move on to your questions, as a part of registering and attending this webinar, we will be sending you an email with a link to the Curation Paradox report alongside the recording of this webinar. Again, just to remind, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section. Any unanswered questions, we'll get back to you directly. So panel, we've got a few questions. Let's kick them off. The first one is, will stock photography even survive the AI revolution? Will the profession of a photographer even exist in the future?
I can tell you as a CEO of a stock media company, right, where obviously the tendency is like other brands to go toward AI, and you will know, knowing Stocksy, that we're all about real, we're all about our people, right? So are we going to be the brand pissing in the wind a number of years later because we didn't, right? Is that going to be our legacy, or are we going to be the standout brand that really created something new and unique and had a standout data set that when everything normalized to the mean, we will actually hold on to that which is distinct and differentiated and human. I will say to Carolina, I know that there are many questions around this, right? And I'm certainly not anti-AI. There are many fantastic uses of AI. I think that Amy has identified some of them for us in terms of creativity, and certainly, just, amazing. There's the area of algorithmically bringing us toward the mean. There's also the area of findability, usability, navigability, accessibility, right? Being able to kind of get to content that we otherwise wouldn't get to. So it's not about being anti-AI. I'm just going back to that as a CEO of a stock media company that talks to many premium brands on a with frequency. There is a pull towards premium content. Brands do care about premium content. They ask for real, they ask for human, not only because of the legal implications of AI, because we know that that'll shift in time, right? It's because of the very emotive components that real and human bring. And so, yeah, I do believe that there will be that the role of a photographer and the creativity of a photographer will exist in the future. And yes, we all have to be open to iterations of how we bring that creativity forward. Might not look as it looks today. And you definitively have a role in shaping the future of our creative verse, so to speak.
Fantastic, fantastic. We've got a flurry of questions come in, so I want to cover as many as we can. Another question we've received asks, style is about consistency. Absolutely true. But your style can suddenly be out of fashion. While it used to be successful, how to deal with that as a creator? This is my biggest concern these days.
Can I punt this to Amy?
Of course. I don't know. I'm kind of caught in a moment of trying to evolve my own style. But I do think that change and trends and things that happen, if I'm understanding the question correctly, there's some new things that happen, and I feel like there's momentum and there's like culture and communities that respond to things that are happening. And I do think that having a stance and a POV, you know, our style and our art is constantly evolving and changing, and as it should. But being true to what's at the heart of it will drive that anchor so that it's not, you know, a brand. I just think of, you know, a brand. What are, you know, our art, whether it's an artist as a brand or a brand being a brand, they have to stay true and authentic to who they are, whether it's a person or an entity. And so that style or that mission or that purpose or that heart is never going to change. The heart is the heart. But as we evolve and technology, style, artistic tastes, world changes, emotions change, whether we're in a terrible time or a fantastic time, music, we all have an ability to move and influence. And I think that what stands out is when your style is purely unique and authentic to you. And I don't mean fashion necessarily, but you know, your art, your brand, and people gravitate towards that because it's it's something that may be really different and stand out, but it feels like, you know, people kind of say, oh, she's sporting that, or it's, you know, I resonate with this brand, it's speaking to me. And I feel like that's the authentic voice. So I think that authenticity should stay, but evolution should always happen. You know, I don't want to ever, you know, you think about still, nobody ever wants to be still. We all want to be in a, you know, always propelling and in a constant state of motion. And I think that that's what feels really exciting. So looking to evolve and in ways that are new and fresh is really exciting without losing the heart of who the artist is, the brand is, we are, our style, our art should always be changing. I mean, I want to look at things from the past to the future and see a curated story that I've built, but that doesn't evolve from what is true to me. So that would be my perspective on that. Jen, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just thinking maybe an example, maybe like a real world example would be Jaguar's rebrand and how they totally transformed their style, but in an unanchored way to the legacy of the brand and the audience that they serve. A counter example to that would be the Gap. How like the Gap's having like this crazy moment right now, and it's evolved. It's like retranslating the nostalgia for that weird 90s like denim on denim vibe, and they've in a way that people are really responding to. So it's like the style has evolved to respond to a contemporary audience, but it's really still like the aesthetic and the tone of the brand is kind of intact. And I think that's where people like, I mean, I know people love to hate on the Jaguar example, but just because it was pretty unhinged. But it's a good example of where style evolved, but without the anchor.
Great. We've got 5 minutes. I want to just get a couple of more questions in. The next question is, do you think real content will once again be popular? And the assumption I'm sure we're taking here from this question is that real content is unpopular now.
I guess the question would be, what is real content? Like, are we thinking about like authentic methods of production, like photography versus AI generated imagery, or like the sort of like broader meta sense of content, like all the articles that we read that are kind of Frankenstein, half written by a person, half written by ChatGPT, half like recycling something. And either way, I think yes, definitely. I think everything will see a reaction, especially when we just get overrun with this issue of what is real, what is fake, and there is predicted to be a real movement towards content authenticity in terms of like authentication and knowing the exact provenance of like where the content came from. Is the person actually the identity that they're being represented as? Is this written by the person who supposedly authored it. So
Yeah.
I think we will see a lot more checks and balances with that.
All right, we've got one last question, and I think this might be one for you, Amy. Can you or can one educate and change the mind of brands, or they have their minds set, and if they ask for AI images, they won't budge and ever use real images?
Absolutely. You can influence just about anyone. I can influence myself. I think we all have the power to influence and change minds, but it has to come from something that is true or real. And I think that brands will be, not just brands, but any one of us will be stuck in our ways if something is not convincing. So if we're not convincing folks of an argument or changing a mind, then it's probably a problem with our story or the way that we're delivering it. So I absolutely believe we should influence and can influence and change minds. It is not easy to do, but we absolutely, it's in the delivery, it's in something that will get you. I always say my mission is to get you to think differently. And if I'm not getting you to think differently, then I'm going to keep trying at it and different sources and get to the truth and try and motivate you as to why this is an important endeavor. So I do think that I could do a whole topic on that, but absolutely, whoever asked that, please be motivated and think about how, what the way that you need to deliver, or what is the truth, what is your truth, or what is the brand truth that will resonate, and that North Star will help things to evolve and land and change minds and perspectives, including those of the brand that you're talking to.
Phenomenal. I think we've got 2 minutes. We'll just take one last question. Any unanswered questions, we will reply directly via email. How does curation add value to a creative professional's day-to-day life? To the panel.
I can speak to that from a very personal point of view, in that we have all of these sources, and it's really up to us to understand how we navigate the depth versus breadth conundrum. We are the creative field. There's constantly more demands to have that really deep into contextual understanding of things. Like the New School of Art and Design offers 45 graduate courses. So that shows how metastasized creative disciplines and creative thought is. So we do have that pressure to really cast a wider net, but then curation comes into understanding. Oh, that's the cat feeder going on. What's relevant to your interests, and I think that is kind of going back to this point about sort of building this library and understanding what background is really interesting. And maybe it's not something that you have to fully process or understand in the moment, but the more you kind of understand the spheres of interest that are informing you, the more you can start building out in those directions and have more clarity over what's kind of a meaningful ingestion of information, instead of just hopping from it's we all have just a dump of half-read Substacks and email notifications, but also newsletters, and it's a whole pile-on. So
Everyday thing.
You have to curate your attention, in other words.
Absolutely. Phenomenal. So we're at time now. Thank you all for your participation and attendance, and we hope to see you all at our next event. Thanks so much.
Thanks all. Great conversation. Thanks for being here. Cheers.